Yes, thank you very much. I must confess that I am becoming more and more an historian, no? A scholar of history of medicine, and maybe because I like what they did more than I do. It is, I think, maybe the age, maybe that I would like to be back when I was student. And this is the case of the investigation that I did on Galileo. What I will focus is not today the Galileo scientist, the Galileo discoverer, the Galileo professor. What I would like to focus here is an assembly of doctors, is Galileo as a patient. That is, Galileo with his sickness, Galileo with the natural history of his body, as the natural history of our body. So let me draw your attention here. Magdi knows this very well, because when he received the honorary graduation in Padua, he remembered that on the ceiling there is that portrait of Galileo. And if you look at here, I'm sorry that there is a light that we cannot have off, and probably at distance you do not see, but you see here is the old Galileo blind. You can imagine the paradox. He was academician of the Lincei. What means linceo? Linceo means lynx, and lynx is the animal with the best sight. So the paradox was indeed, the nemesis was indeed that he that had the best sight with his telescope, he became blind. The blind Linceo. So I thought that was an idea to present the history of Galileo patient like a clinical pathologic conference on Galileo. So Galileo Galilei was academician of the Lincei, was the discoverer of Medicean moons. We are in Florence. He was Florentine. He graduated in Pisa. He was back from Padua in Firenze. He had the homesickness of Firenze. And this is the reason why he left Padua. And he named the moons of Jupiter, the satellites of Jupiter, with the name of Medicean, Cosimo de' Medici, the Prince Cosimo de' Medici. He was affected by arthritis, and at the age of 73, he became blind, totally blind. So this is Galileo in Padua. He said, I spent in Padua the best 18 years of my life. He arrived in Padua at the only age of 28, professor of maths. You can imagine 28 only at professor of maths. That was the fashion in Padua, to have the best, very young professor there. Vesalius only 23, Morgagni 29, and Galileo 28. And this is, you see, the chair of Galileo. In the room of 40s, I think that most of you have seen that. This is the original chair of Galileo. I invite you to come to Padua and see. So, and this is the best scientific work that he did and published. Sidereus Nuncius, to say, I saw something new in the star that I would like to publish immediately. We were at the beginning of 1610, in January, very cold January. He pointed the telescope to the macrocosmos, to the Jupiter, and in a sequence of nights, he observed the existence of satellites that they were changing place. They were rotating around Jupiter, thus proving indeed that even Jupiter, like Earth, had a satellite, and so confirming the theory, heliocentric theory of Copernicus. But our attention this evening is on his case history. 78 at the time of death. He died in 1642. By the way, the same day of January when he observed the moon around Jupiter. The family history was negative. He was born in Pisa, but the family was Florentine. On February 15, 64, at term by a dystotic delivery, he had a neonatal asphyxia. Incredible, so intelligent with a neonatal asphyxia. A great eater and drinker, and had a libertine life. Taking in mind this information, libertine life, because this evening I will try to give an interpretation of his blindness. Until the Middle Age, that is when he was 40, he was said to be of cheerful and pleasant countenance, square frame, well proportionate and above middle age. His complexion was fair and sanguine, yes, his eyes blue and sparkling, and his hair and beard, of which he had an abundance, of reddish hue. Look at here, this is Francesco Apollodoro that painted Galileo at the age of 40. We were just in the middle of age, the best Galileo, in Padua, and now this portrait is in Maritime Museum in London. Now, in 76, at the age only of 11, he had an ophthalmia, okay, in the monastery of Vallombrosa. He was studying in a monastery. In June 1593, he had an episode, and this is important, episode of cooling with intense arthritic pains at the villa of Camillo Trento, Custozza, Vicenza. What is Custozza? My village, where I was born. One of the reasons why I was so close to the story of Galileo is because I was born in Custozza. There, he was only 29, 1 year after he arrived in Padua. He spent, and I will be back soon, he spent a day there, a weekend in the Villa Trento. December 16 and 6, he has a tertian fever. Don't forget it, fever at the Metician Villa in Pratolino. He was here because he was looking after the education of the prince, and he was cured then when he was back in Padova by Professor Menadoi, Professor Acquapendente. Listen, these two professors, we were in 1606, 1602, in Padua, William Harvey graduated. And these were the professors of the commitment, the commission that signed his graduation, William Harvey, Menadoi, and Acquapendente. Then, you know, see, is a recurrent episodes of a fever and arthritis. Listen the episode in Custozza. We are in early summer, June, in 93. He had only aged 29. And what happened? He suffered a very severe episode of illness. Galileo was spending a hot summer day with friends in a villa near Vicenza that belonged to Count Camillo Trento. One room of the villa had the unique, and has still now, the unique feature of being cooled by air circulated through large venti ducts from a waterfall in the nearby caves of Custozza, where the temperature remained usually at 11 degrees throughout the year. what happened? That after a large, huge luncheon, they had a siesta, wearing a few or no clothes in the room, and according to historian Viviani, is a pupil, while they were asleep, unfortunately, a servant opened the window. So there was a lot of cool air coming in. So whatever the exact story, of course, this is what was reported by Viviani, his pupil, probably collecting the memory of the same Galileo. It is certain that we awoke 2 hours later. They were extremely ill, these friends, including Galileo, with high fever, cramps, chills, hemorrhages, intense headaches, and lethargy. All developed permanent and temporary deafness. Incredible. One died after 3 days, another 3 weeks later, still deaf. And Galileo, who was the only one to survive, was temporarily deaf in 1 year, for a few months. So there is this episode that is the starting point of his illness. Okay, so again, we are in a remote case history. In December 1611, he had again arthritis, pain, stitches, and fever to keep him up to the bed. In 1612, hemorrhoids with blood perfusion, another aspect. May 1112, sleeplessness and inappetence. January 1613, renal colic by sandy stones. Other aspects of his disease. And he complained concerning the arthritis. I spent most of the night time in the winter, more in the open than in the bedroom or at the fireplace, because it was during winter night it was possible to see the stars. Okay, his friends were a bit worried. Professor Antonio Magini, that was in the chair of maths at the University of Bologna, wrote to him, "Your lordship should refrain from motion, particularly coaches." He had arthritis. And above all, excess of wine and sexual intercourse. Again, sexual intercourse, libertine. Something was wrong there. I heard, and Benedetto Castelli succeeded him in Pisa. When he moved from Pisa, he was lecturer in Pisa, he moved to Padua, he left Benedetto Castelli in his chair. I heard about your deteriorating illness. My goodness, Mr. Galileo, let go all the stars to ruin and preserve your health. Okay, so again, year by year, started, for instance, in 1616, he had the first episode of probably some visual aspect, visual problem. He reports a corneal halo. In 1617, returned to my usual pains, arthritis. November 1618, he was in bed due to a long, dangerous disease for months. In 1624, he had the first episode of conjunctivitis, fluxion in the right eye. Was a mucosale, was really iridocyclitis, we don't know. But that year, he had a portrait by Ottavio Leoni. I will show you immediately. And you indeed see a difference in between the two eyes. Something was wrong in the right one. In 1690s, 29, he had transient loss of hearing. I like the way he described the deafness, so that is unable to hear an artillery. And 31, he had a new episode of fluxion. It was called in Italian sciesa, that is falling down the ears from eyes, which hindered him to read and write for 2 months. Look at this beautiful portrait. He had several portraits, I must say. They paid a lot of attention for portrait. There was no photo at that time, of course, and so that was the only way to leave a memory of their own appearance and look. You see here, we are in 1624, and there is no doubt there is a supraorbital swelling and the wrinkling here as opposite when compared to the left one. Now, 1632. It is time of the trial against Galileo. We do not mention in detail the trial, but what happened that is he had health problem, and he refused to go to Rome. It took time, and Urbano VIII sent 3 doctors for a so-called fiscal visit. We call fiscal visit, no? In other words, the Inquisition ordered. There was this health check ordered by Urbano VIII. And look at the description. This is the report of the doctors to Urbano VIII. He was the enemy of Galileo for the reason that we know, because Galileo was a heretic. Take in mind we were at that time of the Contra-Reformation, Catholic Contra-Reformation. So his pulse intermits every 3 or 4 beats. Atrial fibrillation? Maybe. From which we conclude that his vital powers are affected, and at his great age, much weakened. To the above are to be ascribed the frequent attacks of giddiness, hypochondriacal melancholy, sleeplessness, and flying pains about the body, to which others can testify. We have observed a severe hernia at risk of rupture into the peritoneum. He had an hernia, very important hernia. All these symptoms are worthy of notice, as under the least aggravation they might become dangerous to life. The Pope did not consider this report, because this report was an alarming report, no doubt, and forced him to go to Rome for the trials, where he was forced to deny, to abjure, and it took 1 month from here to Rome by coach. 1 month, 1 month. Cristina Basso is coming now from Milano to here, 2 hours. Okay, January 15th, 1633. Galileo, before going to Rome for the trial, and the risk was to be condemned at death, to death. So he had to make the will. And the will was made sanu gratia Dei mente sensu visu ed intellectu. So it means that he was still brilliant in mind. Can I be back for one? Do you see here that there is no mention of ocular problems in this fiscal visit of the 3 doctors? Okay, so April 1634. My health condition is troubled. The hernia increased more than ever. The pulse is intermittent with palpitation. I'm surprised that he had not an embolism, cerebral embolism, despite the atrial fibrillation. Immense and sadness, melancholia, extreme inappetence. I feel odious to myself. Oh, he was really depressed. There is no doubt about that. And this is the famous trial. He is just in front of the committee there of the Holy Office, trying to defend himself. And these, you see here, these friars are the Dominicans. the Dominicans were considered Dominicanes, the dogs of God, Dominicani, Dominicanes. So they were extremely aggressive and indeed defensor fidei in some sort. And this is not casual, that were most of them indeed were Dominicani because this their behavior. They were very close to the Pope indeed. Okay. So we are very, very close to the end. February 1633. Now it's time of losing the sight. New episode of fluxion on the right eye. You remember 15 years before the same episode. July 4, 1637, complete sight loss of the right eye. So he lost the sight on the right side. And then 4 or 5 months later, he lost also the left eye. It is also under way of the darkness. I like finally, we are in Christmas, 1637. He lost both. He saw nothing anymore. Look at it in Latin. The apertis oculis quam occlusis. In other words, whether the eyes were open or closed was the same. And there was a letter coming from Elia Diodati that was in Paris, was his pupil, in January 2, 1638. Take in mind that he wrote and received thousands of letters, and most of these letters were fortunately preserved and were collected at the beginning of the last century by a professor in Padua, Favaro. So my Lord said, this pupil, your Galileo, he wrote a letter to his pupil, your Galileo became blind. And I want to quote exactly this letter of Galileo to Elia Diodati, dated January 2, 1638. All light is extinguished. The blindness is the consequence of a very dense cloud, which is formed itself in the space of 7 months, first in the right eye and then in the left eye. That sky, look, I underline this, that sky, that world, that universe, which I, through my brilliant observation and clear demonstration, had expanded 100,000 times beyond anything ever seen by the scholar of the past centuries, has now shrunk and narrowed as to reach no further my own body. He was able never to see his own body. This is blindness. The description is incredible. And look at the signature and the writing of Galileo. In April 1637 was still regular, but thereafter, at the time we are in 1640, after he became blind, you see that he is confused. So, what happened? Listen, because they were, of course, very worried, the friends of Galileo and the pupils of Galileo. And so they asked the medical opinion, like a second opinion at a distance, from a Roman surgeon. The name was Giovanni Trullio. He was called the French because he has been working in Lyon, in France. Okay? So, and now this against the report of, with opinion of this, he was a surgeon, but probably also an ophthalmologist. I infer that his blindness is due to a suffusion which obstructs the pupil and which is incorrectly defined as a cataract. Was not a cataract. it's incredible, without visiting him, simply thanks to the description that the same Galileo sent to him, he was able to establish that it was not a problem cataract, it was a problem iridocyclitis. I was able to observe that the formation of this mucosity covering the pupil is caused by a slight solidification of the aqueous humor. Thus, little by little, a skin, like a pannus covering the pupil, would form in front of the lens, in front of crystallino, and eventually led to blindness. So the final diagnosis made by the same Giovanni Trullio was uveitis with pannus, so-called skin formation, occluding the pupil, and it was the senile cataract was excluded. Therapy, laudanus pills, ice drops, and he surmised that maybe that there was a glaucoma also associated. So he suggested to use the needle decompression if necessary. Incredible, incredible. Okay, so the problem was not here on the lens, was not the cataract. The problem was not in the cornea. The problem was in the pupils here, okay, and the irids here with the inflammation, iridocyclitis here, and covering the space of the pupil and rendering him blindness. Let me read in Latin. This is Giovanni Trullio, the final diagnosis. Cecitatem nasci ex soffusione, pupillam obstruente, quae improprie cataratta dicitur, quia morbi sedes non in superficies est oculorum, sed intracornea, not here, intracornea, et uveam tunica, here, cuius basis est humor aqueus, quod intra oculus factum est, this is humor aqueus, tempore densius et durius factum, also here is humorus aqueus, you see here, anterior room, posterior room. Tempore densium et durius factum, acu deo auxiliante de primi potest. Is a perfect Latin, okay? So, and this is a case, of course, this is the pannus, this is the skin, this is the iridocyclitis. He had a very multiple episodes of iridocyclitis, and with a progressive formation of pannus and eventually leading into blindness, okay? I want to compare the eye of Galileo with this telescope. This is the telescope, and this is the equivalent of pupil. This is the equivalent of iris. So it's absolutely unbelievable what happened there. That is, the pannus closed the telescope and hindered the possibility to investigate the macrocosm anymore. So now we are very, very close to the final interpretation. So the modern interpretation of Galileo blindness is this one. This was a writer's syndrome. There is no doubt that there was, because there was a conjunctivitis, polyarthritis, recurrent. And what about urethritis? Writer's syndrome is an immunological disease, is a consequence of infection of urethra, blenorrhea, gonorrhea, libertine life, sexual intercourse. When he was in Padua, we have evidence that he was absolutely very active. But he was heterosexual, and so that is he had many women there. He was what is it, exuberant? Okay, he was exuberant, and by the way, he had children. He never He had a wife, but was not married. So nobody said that. This is the first time that it has been said in the history of Galileo Galilei here. So I believe that he had urethritis. And that occurred when he was in Padua. Of course, for shame, he never reported this affection. There is no evidence in the letter of this problem. Don't forget that the same occurred to Cristoforo Colombo, that died in 1506 in Valladolid, and he had also the same problem, writer syndrome. It's not surprising. Long trip. Okay, so the epilogue. The epilogue is that in 1638, he did again a will, but this time he said, I am fully blind. In January 18, the anniversary of the first observation of Jupiter satellites, he dies and is buried in the church of Santa Croce, Florence, without honors at the beginning. Autopsy was not performed. I surmise that he had a fever, as I said, so maybe that pneumonitis due to congestive heart failure is the regular outcome, unfortunately, of old age, especially in people with atrial fibrillation. So in March 12, 1737, eventually he had the honor of the exhumation, and then the body was buried in the mausoleum of Santa Croce, and I strongly invite all of you that are here for the first time in Florence to visit Santa Croce and the mausoleum of Galileo. What happened? When they did the exhumation of the body, there was a professor of anatomy, a professor of natural history, and they want to have some relics. That is, they wanted a piece of the body to preserve, of the body of Galileo Galilei. So Cocchi, Antonio Cocchi, took the fifth vertebra, lumbar vertebra. And you see, the Gori took the finger, right finger. This is the fifth vertebra. And this vertebra is now in Padua. Why? Because my predecessor, Domenico Thiene, was a professor of medicine, was able to have this piece, these relics, this fifth vertebra, and then donated it to the University of Padua. That was great, absolutely great. There was the intercession also of Isabella Thiene, the Countess Isabella Thiene. They convinced a friar that was he had the lumbar vertebra to give to Domenico Thiene and then to pass to the university. So this is now the vertebra in Padua. And what we can say, that Galileo was back to Padua in 1823. And I would like to add also thanks to the Thienes. Thank you very much.